Planned Parenthood, good news, some of the other things that are going on locally. And of course, we'll touch on the shooting. That's not good news, but we will still touch on the shooting and some of the other things that are going on that are breaking news for today. So, what you just heard coming in is the actual, factual, good stuff coming from the President of the United States, cutting Planned Parenthood's funding for what they call family planning. Now, remember, family planning was what they used to say they were going to do. Abortion was going to be safe, legal, and rare, and they were going to plan families. And planning families means you don't just get pregnant and just, let the ovaries and other body parts do what they may and let the children come as they may, because if your children aren't spaced 3 years apart or 3.5 years apart, then your family's weird. I've actually had people tell us that because our children aren't the proper spacing apart. And my response to that is, you mean God's will is weird, because you can control, obviously, you can do your best to control how frequent your children appear in your family. But you can also say, I want to have kids and I want to have a family and I'm excited about it, and go for it. And so that's kind of what we did. We actually weren't able to start producing kids at the very beginning of our marriage when I was gung-ho about it. And then after we moved and we were both living in the same place again and we weren't long distance and all that stuff, then everything was flowing as it should. And that was our family. Every family has their own story to walk out. And I think the three individuals who should be involved are our Heavenly Father, the mom and the dad, the husband and the wife. Everyone else should just be quiet. And when I say that, I'm talking about all of you who run around and say, oh, you have 3 kids, or, oh, wow, 4 kids. That must be hard. Stop downing people's families like that. Stop going up to people who are pregnant and saying, oh, how are you going to manage? Stop telling people that when they have one child, well, 1 is plenty. Or when the second child comes, well, you better stop now because you don't know what you're getting into. That kind of negative talk is what's getting us this horrifying birth rate that we're experiencing right now. Below 2. How can we in America, the most prosperous land on the face of the earth, the place where freedom lives, how can we be the ones who are having trouble supporting people who want to have kids? So it's not just that. You know that there's the other part of it is that we've placed such high expectations. If you don't live in a 5,000 square foot house with, 4 of the matching Bichon Frise dogs and you don't have 3 late model cars in the driveway, then you're not really making it. If you and your husband don't both have multiple advanced degrees, and more power to you, I think that's fantastic. And I am a supporter of education, but you don't have to have all of that in order to start your family. And so for every couple that you see that is young and has a child or 2, or they're starting their family, you'll meet dozens of other couples who'll say, we're putting off childbearing until my wife can get to a certain place in her career. We want to pad her 401k before we start making kids. We want to make sure the college funds are all set up before we start having kids. The further along women get in their life journey, meaning into the 30s, the more difficult fertility becomes. And it's not just that. It's really a prevailing attitude that prevents people from having kids. It's seen as, a poverty mindset to have a large family. When the happiest families I know, anecdotal, of course, but it's the truth, happiest families I know are those that have 5 kids. I mean, it's like they're drunk on some kind of happy juice and you can't figure out where they got it from. And this is every family with 5 kids that I know. And we happen to know, in the double digits, we know 20 or more families that have 5 kids or more. And it's amazing because they seem to be living quite nicely. So and when I say it's amazing, I don't mean it's amazing literally. I mean, it's amazing in the face of the kinds of negative comments that you receive. And I know this because we have 3 kids. I couldn't stop the people from approaching me in the Target back when Target was still okay. Y'all know about the AFA boycott. If you don't, afa.net, get over there, sign the pledge. Do not shop at Target anymore. I'm on my 3rd year of not shopping at Target. But when Target was okay, when the bathrooms were still delineated by sex, and I used to go there and our kids were small, I remember being there pregnant on more than one occasion and having some old person come up to me and say, oh, well, I know you're going to stop now because if you keep having kids like that, you're never going to. How do you know? We're not on government assistance. Why do you care how many kids we have? If my husband and I are taking care of ourselves and we're not on the dole, why do you care? Seriously, what makes people feel so empowered to come up to women who are pregnant and tell them that they're about to enter a huge struggle, or, oh, enjoy them while they're young, because when they turn into teenagers, boy, buckle up. You'll be crying into your pillow every night. I've not cried myself to sleep once since our kids have become teenagers. And we have one who's about to fly the nest and go off to college. And I'm not saying that because I'm fantastic. I'm saying that because I would prefer to spend my time praying than crying. So the attitude here in this country is that, number one, the environmentalists have convinced people that we have too many kids, too many people on this planet. People feel children are inconvenient. They'd rather be reading the paper and walking their dogs on Sundays instead of getting up and spending the 2-hour ritual to get small people together and looking presentable, feed them, and then get them out the door to go to church. And then there's a certain level of selfishness, which is you can't be the center of attention when kids are around. Kids suck up all the energy out of the room. They suck up all the oxygen out of the room, and duly so. So when I hear, like, so this is over the break, we hear this discussion about the birth rate, and we covered it here on this show a couple of days ago, and it was one of the One News Now reporters who was talking about this information from a government study about how our birth rate is down, and if it weren't for immigration, we would be spiraling out. We're getting close to that spiral, which is 1.6, the death spiral, where you can't reverse your fertility issues. Now, I want to point out that this study does not break it out by denomination or, Christian versus non-Christian. Evangelicals are having kids. Their birth rate is over 3. And Jewish people, the Jewish community in America, they're having kids. They're actually working hard to keep their birth rate up. They have to, though, because they've had to go through the Holocaust and all of that. They've had their numbers severely reduced on occasion by evil. So that's why they value life so much. So what I want us to do is I want all of us to just think, when you have a moment, or do it now, think about the intersection of Planned Parenthood and their goal of 3 abortions for every woman of childbearing years, and Hollywood's goal of making children seem novel and cute and something you don't actually want for yourself. And all of the industries that put out entertainment make it seem as if children are either to be sexualized or to be ignored or to be deified and treated like gods, but never their proper place, which is they're integral to your family, should you have any. That there's something to be desired because they're the fruit of the womb, which God ties to reward and blessing. God also refers to our children as arrows in the quiver. What do you do with an arrow? Well, if you're a warrior, an arrow is your best bet. In modern nomenclature, it would be like, they'd be like ammunition in the cartridge. In the Bible, it talks about loosing those arrows at some point so that they can hit the mark that God has set for them. So that means you have to make sure that the arrow is straight. You have to make sure that the point of the arrow is sharp. The point of the arrow, in my opinion, would be their mind. The straightness of it would be their character and their integrity and their hard work ethic and their intelligence. And that you are you're pulling back on that bow, but you're wanting to pull as far back as possible. So you have to be strong, but you have to be strong in the Lord. And yes, I believe in capitalism and saving money and investing and making a good life for yourself. But the finances, if they're preventing you from starting a family or from growing your family, that's idolatry, and that's not what God has for you. God actually wants a relationship with us that is such that we would trust him. And in trusting him, we would say, Lord, we want to grow our family, and we're gonna start our family. We're done with college, or we're done with technical school, or we're done with training school, or we're in our apprenticeships, we're married, we've made our home, and now we feel like it's time for us to make our family. And then you begin to make your family, and you don't say, well, 1 kid's all we can do because, statistics now show it's $400,000 per kid to raise them here in the United States, or some outrageous number like that. That's not relying on God. So am I advocating for you to just go wild and have 8 kids in 8 years or something like that? No, I'm not. And this is a decision that has to be made inside the household between the husband and the wife for every family. But if the majority of families are saying no kids, if the majority of families are saying, child rearing just isn't for me. And I have some dear friends who have told me they don't ever plan to have kids, and they say that it's not for them, but they love seeing other people's kids, and that so be it. That can be possible as well. But when you see an entire nation turn towards that, as European nations have done, it's not just individual choices. It's a society that places wealth and personal attainment and the pursuit of self-actualization over God's will for us, which is for us to be fruitful and multiply. We're in no danger of overrunning this country with people. Don't worry. The planet is not about to tip off its axis or stop rotating properly because there's too many people on board. That's not even close to happening. Not even close. Could we do a better job of taking care of each other? Yeah, we definitely need to be working on that. But should people not have children? Nope, that's not what God has. That's not God's will for us. And if you don't believe me, look in the Bible and see what he says about children. At no point does he say, but if you like reading the paper on Sunday, definitely don't have kids. Nope, it's not in there. So I kind of got off into that. But I want to tell you, Brad Todd, founding partner at On Message Incorporated, co-author of The Great Revolt Inside the Populist Coalition, Reshaping American Politics. He's our guest for today. First hour, Larry Pfeiffer, director of the Hayden Center, former chief of staff to the CIA, and director of the White House Situation Room. That's going to be a fun interview. He's coming on in hour 2. We're going to have little bits of good news interspersed throughout the program. And so the first bit of good news is that the president is lack of will in Congress does not mean that he can't, at least for the interim, utilize laws that were implemented by, it was actually a rule implemented by President Reagan that permitted him to defund certain parts of Planned Parenthood. And that's what he's doing now. He's saying if you want these family planning funds, you have to have them go to clinics that don't also offer abortion or counsel for it. And that's a good first step. It's what he can do now. We have other good news during the show. I want to ask you a question to let you hold on to until that segment comes up, which is, what do you do if you're doing a landscaping project in your backyard and you find a safe, and inside the safe are wads of $100 bills and little plastic Ziploc bags of rings and jewelry and loose diamonds? What do you do? I'm going to tell you guys, because this is a true story, something that just happened, and you're going to want to hear that. And then we have a 45-year low on illegal immigration under the first year of President Trump, and other good news bits that are going to be interspersed throughout the program. So I'm so excited about that. Right now, I want to give you our encouraging verse. Our encouragement for today is Micah 7:19. It says, "He will again have compassion on us. He will tread our iniquities underfoot. You will cast all our sins into the depths of the sea." And this is what God promises to do to us. It's Micah 7:19. He promises to do this for us, to separate our sins as far from us as the east is from the west, to forget them, to throw them into the sea of forgetfulness. And therefore, there is no condemnation in Christ Jesus. And so what we have to do is accept that. That's one of the toughest jobs for human beings, period, is to realize that we can't save ourselves, that God has already provided for our redemption. All we have to do is say yes. So if you're feeling guilt or you're struggling with recrimination or regret, which is also a sin, give your cares to the one who paid for it all. Allow him to comfort you and to make you right. He'll stand you up, he'll clothe you in white, and he will give you his forgiveness, and you can move forward. Do that so that you can go into this weekend in full and complete joy. And we'll be back with Brad Todd right after these messages. Stay there.
Hi, I'm Will Addison.
And I'm Miki.
From Airing the Addisons on Urban Family Talk.
We'd like to invite you to the Marriage, Family, and Life Conference coming up August 17th and 18th.
The list of speakers is amazing. We have Ryan Baumberger of the Radiance Foundation, Dr. Clarence Schuler of Building Lasting Relationships, Abraham Hamilton III, Pastor Bert Harper and his wife Jan, Stacy Washington, Lonnie Poindexter, Pastor Dexter Sanders, and we'll be there too.
There's a direct attack by the enemy on marriage and family, and babies in the womb are treated like political footballs instead of life. We want to encourage and equip the body of Christ to fight for the restoration of the family. If we can get our families on track, a lot of society's problems could be solved. The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is from Urban Family Communications, a division of the American Family Association. You can learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. Have you ever known someone who was always negative, skeptical, and full of doubt? I admit, I find these kinds of people frustrating to work with. They see the downside to almost everything. If you say we can do this, they give you 12 reasons why it won't work. And they know somebody else who tried it and it didn't work. Or if you sense that changes need to be made, they declare, no, we need to stay where we are because we're used to it. According to the Bible, that kind of attitude can bring about God's disfavor and anger. In Numbers chapter 14, verses 11 and 12, Moses is engaged in a pitiful dialogue with the children of Israel. The fearful majority have said, don't go into the land of Canaan. They're ignoring God's clear promise that he would give them victory. Here in verse 11, God is speaking, and God is angry. And the Lord said to Moses, how long will this people spurn me? And how long will they not believe in me, despite all the signs which I have performed in their midst? I will smite them with pestilence and dispossess them, and I will make you into a nation greater and mightier than they. Here are two warnings related to this passage. Number one, don't ignore what God has done in your history. Then number two, continued disbelief will cause us to be put aside. God says, I will dispossess you. I'm going to push you aside. I'm not going to use you the way in which you could be used because you won't believe me. Here's what I want you to remember today. It's not okay to be full of doubt and disbelief. In fact, doubt and disbelief is sin. To not believe God, to not trust him, especially when we know what he's called us to do. The Christian life is a journey of faith and obedience. So trust God and get moving.
More information about the ministry of Crawford Loritz can be found online at livingalegacy.org.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Hey there. Welcome back to the show. I want to point out to people, because I sometimes will have people ask me, welcome back to the show, StacyOnTheRight.com, at StacyOnTheRight on Twitter and Instagram, AFR.net for American Family Radio, and UrbanFamilyTalk.com, which is where you can find our podcast and also register for our Marriage and Family Conference. So now, back to what I was going to say. I often have people ask me, well, what makes you think, that you're right about what you're talking about? Which is not a bad question. I mean, it's not horrible. They'll say, you're talking about this, you're talking about that, and it's like you think you're an expert. Well, I do consider myself to be, a subject matter expert in some areas, but in other areas, I do the research because I have not yet done the research. So I do the research in order to prepare myself to have the discussion. And it is a discussion. That's why we have call lines, which are always open, 866-963-2037. And it's always fun to engage. But one of the things that kind of gives me the reason I can say these things is that I'm behind the mic. This is the place where I've been stationed to pass out the information. And then for some of it, it's just straight up fact, and some of it's opinion, and you can tell the difference clearly. It's pretty obvious. But I think if you're wanting to have your own basis by which you can launch off your opinions, you have to spend a lot of time researching it. And you have to look at not just the pros for what you believe, but the cons. And then once you understand both sides, you can choose a position. And then once you've chosen that position, you'll be very firm in it because you'll know I've researched and I understand both sides of this argument, and the reason why I support this is, and then you'll have that together. And that's where I'm coming from. So it's not, I'm not on high raining down prognostications. Not at all. I'm right down here in the thick of it with you. And it's a privilege to be here. But I do have a place from which I'm coming that is knowledge-based and not emotionally driven. And so, take that for what it is. And thank you so much for listening and for reaching out an email. Also, I want to mention that at StacyOnTheRight.com, under the columns tab, you can read a lot of the columns that I've written for a lot of different publications, Daily Caller, St. Louis Post-Dispatch, America's First Freedom, different places like that. You can go there and read the columns that I've written and kind of get a little bit more understanding on where these opinions that I'm sharing with you here are coming from. So now it's my pleasure to welcome our guest. It's Brad Todd, founding partner at On Message Incorporated, co-author of The Great Revolt Inside the Populist Coalition, Reshaping American Politics. Brad, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to talk to you. So let's talk about, first of all, this book. So The Great Revolt. Why did you write that?
Well, I wrote this book with Selena Zito, who is a well-known conservative columnist. Her column appears in she works for the New York Post her column also appears in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and over 90 newspapers nationwide. She's also a contributor on CNN. Many people may recognize her from that. And Selena's famous for being Jake Tapper called her the one reporter that got the election right in 2016, and she's famous for traveling around the middle America, and she travels by car and stays at bed and breakfast and eats only at local diners and places like that, and meets people in their real lives where they really are, as opposed to covering politics by talking to politicians. And so that helped her get a handle on it in 2016 a lot sooner than most people. I'm also a native of sort of real America. I'm from East Tennessee originally, in a little place called Clacks Gap, a very small rural place. And from my perspective, I didn't pick Donald Trump to win the Republican nomination. It was, and in fact, I predicted he was going to lose it several times during the primary process. And so, after the election, we wanted to dig deeper and ask ourselves: are we in the middle of something changing? Is this the beginning of something changing, or is this at the end of something? And so that was really the purpose behind this book, to examine this coalition of populists and conservatives that came together to do something historic.
Okay, so that's fascinating. I do know who Selena Zito is. I believe we follow each other on Twitter, and I've seen her on CNN quite a bit. So it's a fascinating book, or at least I'm thinking it is, considering the fact that there were very few. I know quite a few people here locally who called it for Trump early on. Almost as soon as he was the nominee, they said, oh, he's going to win. And I did have a feeling that he could win. And I'd even said I was definitely opposed to the idea that he had zero chance of winning.
Right.
But I didn't think he'd do as well as he did, just because some of the negativity that was coming in with the fake poll results that the Democrats were trumpeting kind of seeped into my thinking on it. And I allowed them to kind of blunt the results that I thought he could achieve. Because I know my husband said he could definitely win, but he doesn't talk about politics a lot. He was just said that over dinner. He was like, I wouldn't count him out. I think he could definitely win. And I said, yeah, but the polls look horrible, but they can't be right because they're saying 98% chance for her, and that's impossible. And he said, there you go. So I agree with that. So let's talk a little bit about how this populist coalition is reshaping American politics. A lot of people are refusing to acknowledge that. In fact, I wrote a column in January of 2017, and I was talking about the utter shock that I was experiencing at how little acceptance the Democrats were showing to the actual truth that Donald Trump was going to be inaugurated later that month. And it has persisted. Now it's a year and some months later, and he's the president, and they're still fighting it. So how is this populist coalition reshaping American politics?
I think you make a great point. For a lot of people on the left, the election night never ended. They've never been able to declare him the winner of the 2016 election, and so therefore they've never sort of been willing to afford him the kind of treatment you give to the president of the United States. But we think that another way to look at it is this coalition is a lot different than any other Republican coalition we've seen before. Donald Trump did broaden the Republican coalition to include people who had voted for President Obama and Democrats their whole lives. We based the book in 10 counties in the 5 states in the Great Lakes that had switched from Obama to Trump, and in all 10 of these counties had also switched from Obama to Trump. And in some of those places, the swing was amazing. I mean, in Ohio, 35 counties swung 25 points or more. It really was a dramatic change in American politics, and this is coming in an era when most political experts have told you, there are no swing voters, everything's just frozen and polarized. But he did mobilize a lot of people to change long-held behavior patterns when it comes to partisan voting, and he did it first in the Republican primary. I mean, there's no question he shattered the Republican establishment's architecture in winning the primary. I mean, he campaigned half the time in the primary saying he might run as an independent. He might not abide by the loyalty pledge. So the first casualty really was the Republican Party. And then in Hillary Clinton, you have the epitome of the Democratic establishment. There's no one that could sort of symbolize that and have more consensus among the long-held Democratic power structure than her. And the media, the news media, in predicting his death every week in the campaign, his political death, you have to say he shattered sort of their architecture as well. But our contention was that this coalition of populists sort of has a skepticism of not only big government, but big business and big entertainment and big media and big tech as well. And so we hope that by the end of reading this book, The Great Revolt, you end up asking yourselves what's going to break next. What institution is going to go down next at the hands of this populist coalition?
So I've been looking at the reverberations that have been occurring, and I think it's kind of unique that it happens under President Trump. So the advent of the Me Too movement, which follows the Black Lives Matter movement, but has had significantly more success than the Black Lives Matter movement has ever achieved in changing public perceptions about what's acceptable from certain groups of people, namely in the Me Too movement instance, men. And it's interesting because it was actually, in my opinion, the impetus for it was, yes, Harvey Weinstein was a horrible man, but they'd known about him for decades. But it was convenient for them to throw him under the bus now because they thought that they would catch President Trump and roll him under there as well. But the opposite has happened. Most Americans care even less about what politicians do in their private lives with their relationships than ever before. Do you think that's directly attributable to the success of Donald Trump's programs, or the fact that Bill Clinton really was the first man to ever walk away unscathed and everyone's kind of like, meh, because of it?
No, I think that a lot of things about Donald Trump's personal life bothered people in his coalition. I mean, we ask a question. The book is backed up not just by field reporting in those 10 counties that switched from Obama to Trump, but by a 2,000-person survey in those 5 states of Trump voters. And we found that a pretty high number of those voters, between 20 and 30%, had said that they were a little bit embarrassed or afraid to tell their friends they were voting for Donald Trump because they knew they'd disapprove. And so there definitely was a lot of conflicted emotions among some members of the coalition due to personal behavior issues. But in the end, they concluded that their choices were Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, and they had qualms with Donald Trump personally. They had qualms with Hillary Clinton, both on personally and on the direction she'd take the country.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the toughest questions for me is when someone will say, how can you support him? And of course, because of what I do for a living, I can always rattle off his successes. But in the end, I end up having to say, because I'm a Christian conservative and Christian radio. And so the entire message that I have kind of goes against, if you will, infidelity, multiple marriages, et cetera. But he's not the first person we've ever had in the White House to have behaved this way. And I guess I'm just surprised that there are so many people on the left who are obsessed with his behavior when they never cared before. And they don't really care now.
No, they excused it.
Yeah.
But, it's one of the archetypes. Inside the book, we do 7 archetypes of Trump voters. Not every Trump voter will find themselves in one of those 7, and some people will find themselves in more than one of those 7. And if you were a Trump voter, I think you'll enjoy reading it and trying to figure out which one fits you. Mm-hmm. But one of them is what we call King's Irish Christians, and white evangelicals predominantly, and conservative Catholics, and and certainly evangelicals of other demographic groups as well. But that group, in our interviews, they really it was a transaction. They knew that Donald Trump didn't reflect sort of their own religious upbringing, and certainly didn't reflect mine. And so I understand that sentiment, or even he wasn't even very conversant of a lot of things evangelicals believe in our religious practices in the campaign. However, he did have very shared priorities. That's one of my favorite lines. Tony Perkins, who leads the Family Research Council, said, "My support of Donald Trump's not based on shared values; it's based on shared priorities." And I think it was a very pragmatic choice by a lot of conservative Christians to decide that a Supreme Court seat was open, religious liberties threatened, and with Donald Trump, he's given us a list of the justices he would pick to fill it, and this is exactly the pragmatic thing to do. So
your quiz inside there, I love political books with quizzes in them where I get to find something out the end. That is my favorite. Coming Apart by Charles Murray, it's a big, thick, heavy lift of a book, and it is, it takes time to get through it, but it has a quiz in it that's really in depth, and it tells you where you fall in the middle class, upper middle class, and
how thick is your bubble?
Yeah, it is. But in the book, it's even more in depth than the one you can take online, and so that's one of my favorite ones. But it sounds like I should pick yours, the paper copy of yours, up because I need to take the quiz in there. And I'm telling you, listeners, so the most interactive thing in a book, especially if it's well researched, which it sounds like yours is, like research and data and poll driven, which I love those, and then you have a poll in there or a questionnaire, and then you take it and then you get to see exactly where you fall in. So it's like you become a part of the book. So that's an endorsement from me to, do as I'm going to do, which is get the book. So tell me something about, tell me something about you, and then something about Selena Zeno. Or I'm sorry, I'm totally braining out over here. Selena Zito. Tell me something about each of you that we would maybe be surprised to learn, or something that we wouldn't expect based on what you've written here, which is a data, like you guys are wonks.
Well, I guess like I said, I'm from rural East Tennessee. I grew up on the same piece of property that 6 generations of my family had grown up on. And that by the way, no one ever successfully made a living on the land. By the way, it's not a. It's but that's kind of an unusual background in my profession. I make advertisements and do strategy for Republican campaigns around the country, Senate races, governor's races, congressional races. And not a lot of people in my field sort of come from that background. When I came home when I was born and came home from the hospital, both my parents had dropped out of college and lived in a trailer, and so it's a little bit different, a different upbringing. My parents are the American success story. I mean, they went to college at night, got their degrees when I was a kid. My dad moved from pushing a mail cart up into middle management at a Department of Energy facility. So that's a little bit different background. Selena's story, the most interesting thing I think that you might not know if you look at this book is here she was, the only reporter, or at least got credit by CNN, the only reporter to get the election right. And on election day, she was unemployed. Her newspaper that she'd worked at for more than a decade had gave her a buyout in September. The paper's sort of changing its focus and experiencing a different economic model, gave her a buyout. And so she literally, the day she walked out of the newspaper, she got a text that said, you have an interview with Donald Trump tomorrow. And she didn't have anywhere to sell the story to. So she tried the New York Times, she tried the Washington Post. They weren't interested. So finally, the Atlantic magazine agreed to take her story on Donald Trump. And the interview really just made a bunch of news and caught fire. And CNN, the day after the election, she was walking to her bakery next door to her house to get a part-time job just to fill in the gap because she had no journalism job. And CNN called and hired her on the way.
That's a great story.
So,
yeah, your talent will find a way for you.
On that moment, she felt the way a lot of people who voted for Trump felt, that what it was like to have your industry devalued and your work devalued and to not be wanted anywhere.
Fantastic. Okay, so everybody, the website is greatrevolt.com. They have some wonderful videos up there. It's like an interactive site, not just a place to land and buy the book. You can also buy the book from there, by the way. It's at all the major retailers as well. Brad, Todd, thank you for coming on today. Great job. Thank you. I'm looking forward to reading the book and taking the quiz.
Thanks a lot. Hope you enjoy it.
Sure.
Let us know.
I will. So that's the segment. We'll be back with more right after this. So you keep it here. It's Good News Friday. We have all kinds of fun stuff for you, so stay there.
One of the first steps to becoming a Christian is recognizing our sinful nature. What makes it so difficult is that we have selective vision when it comes to our own issues. It's easy for me to see your faults, but when it comes to seeing my own, then my eyesight automatically gets bad. One surefire way to measure new birth in Christ is by opened eyes and a clear vision. Sometimes we can pass between having sight and having no sight because we have fallen asleep to the needs around us, or our perspective on those things that are eternal is distorted. Whatever the case, there is nothing more dangerous than having blurred vision and still thinking that it's clear. Don't measure your vision by your own standards. It will be warped and distorted every time, but rather measure it by God's standards. God desires that our eyesight remains clear. So how is your eyesight today? With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Tony Johnson. Connect with us at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Hi, I'm Alan. I was only 12 when some drug dealers by my playground got me hooked, and I spent the next 25 years struggling with an addiction. Fortunately, Teen Challenge has reversed all that, and I'm drug-free. If you know an adult or teenager who's struggling with a chemical addiction, Teen Challenge can help. Call us today at 417-581-2181 or reach us online at teenchallengeusa.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
I shoot up dope when I was sad, when I was happy, or just was bored. I've lived off fast cash and drugs for a long time. The Teen Challenge took me in. This program saved my life. I won't be leaving the program the same person I was.
If you know an adult or teenager who's struggling with a chemical addiction, Teen Challenge can help. Call us today at 417-581-2181 or reach us online at teenchallengeusa.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
More than 1 million believers have signed the pledge to boycott Target, and we urge you to join them. The American Family Association opposes the policy of Target allowing transgenders into the bathroom of their choice. Here's AFA President Tim Wildman.
There's a reason why we've had male and female separation in restrooms and fitting rooms for all of mankind's history.
A policy which allows men into women's restrooms and fitting rooms is not right, nor is it safe.
I think the human resources departments of these major corporations are the tail wagging the dog, because I just can't see corporate executives at Target or anywhere else sitting around a table going, you know, guys, I think we need to open up our women's restrooms for men.
Visit afa.net to learn more and sign the pledge to boycott Target. Don't spend your money at Target until they stop putting our family members at risk with this dangerous, politically correct policy. That's afa.net.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right.
X marks the spot, right in Matthew Emanuel's yard.
You dream as a kid that, you find a buried treasure. And it happened. It was unbelievable.
He couldn't believe it until he could see it, quite literally, because trees had been blocking the mystery treasure box.
But it was really prominent when the deer ate away all the foliage.
So 2 weeks ago, they brought in Bamboo Bob to replace those trees. His crew moved the box and discovered what it actually was.
When you keep zooming, you could see there's a safe right there. Of course, I didn't know it was a safe. I just thought it was some electrical box.
When you find treasure, you open it, and that's what they did.
Hundreds and jewelry, diamonds, engagement ring, dozens of rings, gold with jade. It was stunning.
4 years in the Woodale Avenue home, and the couple never knew there were thousands upon thousands of dollars, smelly, soaking wet, and stuck together, just rotting in their yard.
I just kept on peeling more hundreds and more hundreds and more hundreds.
In the safe, another discovery, a paper with an address which they linked to their neighbors.
Okay. So if you've done any projects around your house, I was just thinking to myself, we have an area of our yard that is, so it's wooded, but not wooded only with trees. It's got that, the honeysuckle that's only around in the spring and summer and fall, and in the wintertime it's just sticks. And so we've got that in amongst the trees along the edge there. And we've been into that area before to look and to dump leaves when we clean up the yard. And I've seen like the post from something that was in the ground, the concrete base of it. The previous owners just threw debris back there because no one sees it. So the first thing I thought when I heard this story was, we need to go all along the edge of our property and see if there's anything in there, because what a discovery. Imagine in the picture, if you're watching the video, you can see in the picture that he has that this safe was literally, it was visible in and among the tree line. It had a little bit of foliage in front of it, and you could see it just sitting there, and that it was painted white and that was kind of rusty. That's what you could see from a distance. Now, I'm nosy Nelly. I would have been up in that thing for as soon as we closed. I would have been over there dragging that out and trying to figure out what it was. But this couple, they've lived there for years. And the only reason they discovered this is because they decided to do something with the bamboo that was along the edge of their property. And they have a nice sized lot, but it borders their next door neighbors directly. And so that's what the bamboo along the edge is. It's meant to provide privacy and also to mark the line. And so, you've got this going on, and it's a fascinating story because you have to kind of think to yourself, what would you do? Would you keep it? Would you try to find out where it needed to go? You found a metal safe that's rusted and the edge of your property. So it's on your property and you own the property, so it's yours technically. But what do you do? Well, if you're wondering what this guy did, he told the news people, it's number 3.
First, I knocked on the door and I asked them if they were ever robbed, and they said they were.
The NYPD says a burglary was reported at that home in 2011. A safe missing with about $52,000 worth of property.
What was their reaction? I mean, this is years without all of this money.
Well, she was shaking.
And they were told, the cops told her, you'll never see your stuff again.
Those neighbors didn't want to go on camera, but say they're surprised and grateful.
A couple people have said to us, why did you return it? But it wasn't even a question. It wasn't ours.
This elephant now sits where the safe once was, and the couple says it'll always serve as a reminder of their incredible discovery.
So did you get a reward?
Not yet. Not yet. I guess the reward is karma. Good karma.
Nothing wrong with that. On Staten Island, Jenna DeAngelis, CBS 2 News.
I second that.
Yep.
No arrests have been made in connection with the stolen safe.
Why would you throw it in the woods, by the way?
No idea.
Unbelievable.
So when he says the woods, again, it's an area along the edge of his property and the next door neighbor, and it's very wooded in that it looks like it's maybe 3.5 to 4 feet in depth and runs the front to back length of the property behind the house. And it's full of bamboo and other landscaping. And what they did was they were cleaning all of that out so they could replace it with more stately pieces, you know, like arborvitae and the little round boxwood hedge, little round boxwood bushes, that type of thing. So that's why they needed to have that box out of there so they could clean everything out and go back in with what they wanted. So a couple of questions pop into your mind. Well, first of all, he says that he hasn't received a reward yet. I would think that because they returned it to their neighbor, and he didn't say which one, who they'd been robbed in 2011, and they were told by the police, you're never getting that safe back. Whatever was in it is gone. Forget about it. But they had their address in there, which is how the neighbor who found it knew who to give it back to. Well, if they had lots of money in bags that was muddy and wet, and he just kept peeling back $100 bill after $100 bill, that is what's known as mutilated U.S. currency. So if I were to take a guess, I would ascertain that the family that just received their actual property back is turning in the damaged or mutilated U.S. currency, and, you know, it will be replaced. The Bureau of Engraving and Printing considers mutilated money to be less than about 51% of the original bill. Any bill that is so badly damaged that its value cannot be determined without special handling and examination. Mutilated currency has most often been damaged by fire, flooding, chemicals, explosions, animals, or insects. Another very common source of damage to currency is fossilization or deterioration from being directly buried in soil for long periods of time. So the Bureau of Engraving and Printing redeems mutilated currency as a free public service. Mutilated currency must be mailed or personally delivered to the BEP. And according to the U.S. Treasury, they do the following. They receive the mutilated currency with a letter that states the estimated value of the currency and an explanation of how it became mutilated. Each case is carefully examined by an experienced mutilated currency examiner, and it takes a lot of time. There's a heavy volume, and the Bureau of Engraving and Printing has the final authority for the settlement of the claim. And they will replace the mutilated currency if more than 50% of a bill that can be identified as U.S. currency is present, along with sufficient remnants of any relevant security features, or less than 50% of a bill that's identifiable as U.S. dollars. And the method of mutilation and supporting evidence demonstrate that to the satisfaction of the Treasury that the missing portions have been totally destroyed. So in other words, you're not bringing in half, saying it was mutilated or destroyed, getting the money back for it, and then coming back in with the other half, basically doubling your money. So they want to prevent that. Every year, they handle about 30,000 claims and redeem mutilated currency valued at over $30 million. So they list the procedures on here, and I'm sure that's what that family is going through. I would hazard to say that they probably are going to give him a reward of some sort, because if you think about it, he really he did the right thing. He really did the right thing by just giving them all of their property back, all of the loose diamonds, the rings, the jewelry, and the mutilated cash. So good on him for doing that. I thought it was such a great story, such a good feel-good story for today, especially since it's Friday. So I want to point you guys over to the website at urbanfamilytalk.com. Don't forget we're having that conference, and I'm going to be there. So if you've ever wanted to meet me or buy a mug directly from me, you're going to be able to do that because we're going to have mugs for sale there, the Stacey on the Right Show mugs, and we might have some other swag. I don't know. I'm just working on things right now, just trying to keep up. So you're going to want to be a part of that. So definitely consider, if you're traveling down in the summertime and you want to come down to Tupelo for the conference on the 17th and 18th of August, that'd be great. Or if you already live in Tupelo, hey, more power to you. We'd love to see you. And we are going to now pivot over into what I consider to be bad news, okay? I'm not going to lie. Sometimes I have to mix in some bad news with the good news. And I know you guys are going to appreciate this because this keeps you informed. Now, you know I have a running list on my website at staceyontheright.com of all of the offenses that I can find, that I've been able to find, of people sexually assaulting or molesting men, women, girls, boys at Target stores. That's on my website. You can go through and read all of the instances that I've been able to find. And if you find others, you can also send me a tip. There's a contact form on the website if you know of an instance that I don't have listed there. So a reportable instance, meaning the police were called and it's a news story. Those are the only ones I'm reporting. So you're probably wondering, well, why are you bringing that up? Well, okay. So because there have been two particular instances, and this goes to American Family Association's boycott of Target stores. But this just goes to show you that this bad policy of making bathrooms unisex when they have stalls is a problem for all retailers. Target is the main culprit, and they're a huge retailer, and we want them to stop and set the example for other retailers. But for the other retailers that are following suit, the same kind of problems that Target has with men seeing their, I shouldn't say men, with sexual predators seeing their stores as a feeding ground, a place that they can go and operate with impunity, these things are now starting to spread out into other retail locations. So you've got two instances here that I want to tell you about, and I'm telling you this for informational purposes. So this is, again, you guard things that you care about. You take under control things that you feel are of value and that you do not want harm, damage, or taken from you. This is the attitude that we should have about our children and women. Okay? Yes, I've already told y'all I'm not a feminist. I absolutely believe in chivalry and men protecting women and women being the lesser vessel and women needing protection from men. I believe in that. As a gun-toting mama, I'm prepared to take care of myself, but the person who is charged with taking care of me on this earth is my husband, and God watches over me always. So you got this man standing in front of the women's bathroom stall in a New Jersey Bed Bath & Beyond. He's standing in front of the bathroom stall, moaning. He was caught on camera following her into the restroom of a South Jersey Bed Bath & Beyond and stood in front of her stall making these obscene noises. Evesham Township police officers were called to the home goods store on Route 73 in Marlton on Sunday. The woman told the officers she noticed this bald man wearing glasses with a blue shirt and black boots, and he followed her into the ladies' room. She goes into the ladies' room anyways. Like, if he followed me in, I would try to get back out. This is, again, use your common sense, ladies. You don't want to be alone in a bathroom with a man you don't know, in a public restroom. You don't want that. So she could see his boots under the stall door. Investigators reviewed surveillance video that shows the man standing around the women's restroom and waiting for her to show up. And then when she walks in, he follows in. Then he leaves. This is all in the video. They show a picture in the article and ask anyone who has information about it to contact the Evesham police at 856-983-1116. Anonymous tips can be left at 856-983-4699, or you can text ETBD tip to 847411. Bed Bath & Beyond has not responded to NBC 10's request for comment. No nearby stores have reported any similar activity. Now, I want to give credit where it's due. Obviously, the Bed Bath & Beyond employees are probably horrified by this. But when corporate makes a decision that anyone who wants to can use any bathroom that they want to, you set yourself up for situations like this where normally you'd be able to say, I just saw a man go into the women's restroom, and an employee would be able to contact security or someone else in the store who's charged with that, and maybe even male employees would be able to go into the bathroom and say, sir, please leave the ladies' restroom, or we're going to call the police. But if corporate policy is such that any grown man, no matter what his state of dress or formal appearance is, can enter any bathroom facility, no matter if it's occupied or not, because there are stalls, then you have a situation where the employee's hands are tied. If your policy says any man can use any restroom that he wants, then you're setting yourself up for a lawsuit if some employee says, I just saw a 9-year-old girl go in the bathroom and 2 grown men. They followed the little girl in the bathroom. And what are they supposed to do? Their gut says, go protect the little girl. But the policy of the business says, you got to let a man do what he's going to do. Do you see how nonsensical that is? That's why we have to fight back against these policies. And that's what we're doing at American Family Association with our boycott pledge for Target and their ridiculous bathroom policies. So the second story is of a convicted child molester. He's convicted back in 1996 of molesting an 8-year-old girl or child. And earlier this week in Springfield, he was found in a women's bathroom. This is from the Springfield News Leader. Brian K. Johnson was allegedly using the sink of the women's locker room in the Family Center located in Doling Park when a woman spotted him. According to court documents, Johnson, 49, nervously pulled up his hood and left the locker room. A park ranger interviewed the witness over the phone, then headed to the Doling Park Family Center. He interviewed a custodian there. The custodian told the ranger that Johnson had allegedly entered the family center without buying a day pass and went into the hot tub with his shorts on. Then the custodian told the ranger that Johnson was showering in a locker room, the men's room this time, and had been in there for more than an hour. When the park ranger entered the locker room and confronted him, he initially gave a false name and date of birth. When he learned that the guy was a sex offender, he arrested him. Court documents say Johnson was questioned by authorities in 2015 after digging through a dumpster in Sequoia Park. So he's being held in Greene County Jail on a $15,000 bond for loitering within 500 feet of a park as a sex offender. And this is why we do what we do. Protect what's valuable to you. Children shouldn't be using the bathroom by themselves. And you shouldn't be shopping in places that'll let a man stroll into a bathroom after a woman. That's just good common sense. We'll be back with Hour 2 right after these messages. Keep it here.
Urban Family Talk. Urban Family Talk.
Hey, I'm Miki, co-host of Aaron the Addisons on Urban Family Talk. I want to invite you to be part of our online chat community we've affectionately called The Churbin. While you listen to your favorite programs, you have the opportunity to communicate in real time with the hosts of those programs and other Urban Family listeners. Find out what the talk is all about. Become a Churbinite at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News on the Hour, I'm Chris Woodward. 10 people are dead, 10 injured after a high school shooting in Santa Fe, Texas. That's according to Governor Greg Abbott in a press conference this afternoon.
Law enforcement is still in the process of undertaking both searches and investigation of the entire scene as well as other locations. They have warrants out concerning the person who was responsible for the shooting, and they include warrants to search 2 residences. The reason why there's some slowness in being able to undertake these searches is because of the potential for explosive devices to be found in these residences. They want to make sure they're able to enter them without anybody being harmed. One reason why there is concern about explosive devices is that various different kinds of explosive devices have already been detected. One was a CO2 device Another was a Molotov cocktail, and there are various other types of explosive devices that have been identified both in a home as well as in a vehicle. There's also a search warrant out for the vehicle of the shooter.
The shooter is identified by multiple news outlets as Dimitrios Pagordzits, a student at the high school. According to the governor, the weapons used were owned by the father of the shooter, and the weapons were legally owned by the father. More coverage at onenewsnow.com. The Trump administration will resurrect a Reagan-era rule that would ban federally funded family planning clinics from referring women for abortions or sharing space with abortion providers. Eric Scheidler of Pro-Life Action League says he is over the moon about this decision by the Trump administration to deny funds to Planned Parenthood.
This is going to strip Planned Parenthood of $60 to $80 million a year. That's only a small part, but a very significant part of their federal funding. And the next step, of course, is to go after the rest of that funding through Medicaid and other sources. That's a much harder hill to climb. This one we're able to do without Congress, and I'm very excited that it's happening.
A Republican-drafted farm bill fell short in the GOP-led House today. Fox's Jared Halpern has more from Washington.
Republican leaders could not hold a GOP coalition together on a farm bill designed to renew crop subsidies and add stricter work and job training requirements for food stamps. It was those work requirements that turned off Democrats. None voted for the measure, but 30 Republicans also voted no. A group of conservatives had threatened opposition unless first getting a vote on their preferred immigration bill. Jared Halpern, Fox News.
And a legal scholar says it is past time for special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation to wrap up. AFN's Chad Gerning continues our coverage.
Thursday marked the one-year anniversary of Mueller's appointment as a special counsel to investigate Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election and whether the Russian government coordinated its activities with associates of candidate Donald Trump. Hans von Spakovsky is senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation. In an op-ed published by the Fox News Channel, he questioned the need to continue the investigation.
He spent $10 million, and after a year, according to the public record, he hasn't turned over a single piece of evidence of any kind showing that there was any collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russian government. And that was the original purpose of his investigation.
And von Spakovsky says if Mueller refuses to end the probe, the House of Representatives can intervene.
So if the House of Representatives believes this money is being improperly used for an improper investigation, then the House could deny appropriation funds for this investigation and withdraw the funding. If that happens, then the investigation will definitely end.
Von Spakovsky says Mueller needs to wrap up his investigation, report to Congress, and then let lawmakers either act against the president or allow him to finish his term, focused on making America great again. I'm Chad Groening.
That's all our time for this hour. Find more news at onenewsnow.com.
Where there is no prophetic vision, the people cast off restraint. But blessed is he who keeps the law. Our country is suffering because of lack of leadership, division, and a disdain for godliness. Urban Family Talk exists to be a prophetic voice as we speak on matters of religion, family, and culture. We will not be silent on issues plaguing our communities today as we sound the alarm of truth, wisdom, and empowerment. Join the movement at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Under this president, we had a 45-year low of illegal immigration last year. That's not a coincidence. That shows that enforcing the law, having consequence to deterrence, so illegal activity has an effect. However, these criminal organizations that smuggle aliens have found loopholes. Now it's up to Congress to close these loopholes and gain control of this border.
And that's a little bit more good news for you. How you like that? That is a 45-year low on illegal immigration under President Trump. Now, why am I excited about that? Because that means there are fewer women and girls and little boys being trafficked over our border for sex and horrible slavery-type situations. It means that we have fewer people who are here illegally who have to be taken care of by hardworking taxpayers. And more than any of that, it means that opportunities that American citizens, specifically those in disadvantaged communities, those opportunities are open to them to take advantage of. And if you're the kind of person who thinks that white people in rural areas just want to do heroin and destroy their families and feed their babies Mountain Dew so they can have dew mouth, and that people in inner cities don't want to work, they don't want jobs, they just want to sit around and collect welfare. Well, you got a real sin problem going on, and I'm sorry for you. And you need to rethink your life. But the rest of us understand that Americans do want to work. And yeah, there are always going to be some people who don't have a good work ethic. But the majority of the people that you find, that you bump into, who are in these jobless situations, if they could turn their life around, they would. And the best way to turn your life around, second only to accepting Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, is a job. A job is the great equalizer. There's a reason why God talks about work so much in the Bible. He created us to obviously glorify him and worship him forever. But here on earth, we're here to work. We all have something that we're supposed to be doing. And in the interim to you finding out what that is, maybe you're not sure what it is, or maybe you're the kind of person who thinks a person can't be called to work a farm life, or to work in a meat processing plant, or to work at the post office. You don't know what God has called someone to do. And we don't have any time to sit up and unpack all the reasons why you're sitting in judgment at some jobs and acting like they're not worthy. Everyone's not going to be a rocket scientist or a PhD. Not everyone in this country is going to have a bachelor's degree, which... what's so funny about having to explain that is that the statistics don't even begin to support this idea that every American is going to have a bachelor's degree. 70% of all Americans do not have a bachelor's degree. If you break it down by race, it's more like 40% of American whites have bachelor's degrees or more. 60% of them do not. And then it's the numbers obviously are not as good for other ethnic minorities, but we're making gains in those areas. But for people who don't want to go to school to get a degree to launch into a profession, for those who have that entrepreneurial bent, or those who do want to work for someone else, and they want to be employed in a workplace where they have coworkers and they want to work that, who are we to judge and decide that's not good enough and that we need illegal immigrants to do that work so Americans can do something better? There is nothing better than having a job where you work with people who respect you and you do a good job at that work because you enjoy it and you earn a living at it, and you get to go home and then take the fruit of that work and support your family or supplement your income at home, whatever your situation is. So we have to change our attitude in the way we speak about these things. Some Americans are perfectly situated for a college education. They've been prepared for that, and that is their pathway. But for the majority of Americans, at least at this point in our history, a college education is not going to be their primary directional choice. It's just not going to be. And it's okay for us to say some Americans are going to do this job or that, and to respect them as well. They deserve our respect as well. Because, I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but not every man is as handy as some husbands. Some men need to call a plumber. There's nothing wrong with that. But you need to have plumbers to call, don't you? You need to be able to call tradespeople to come and do things for you. And that's a part of living in our society as well. It's not only there's no shame in it, there's honor in knowing how to do that rough, kind of dirty job type work. There's a lot of honor in it because you're the one we rely on these people, and they do work that we don't ourselves want to do, meaning I know how to unclog a toilet. And I know how to do some other stuff that it's probably would be surprising to people that I know how to do it, but it's because we've been remodeling. But I don't want to do it. And most often I call someone else to do it, and I happily pay them to do it. So we need tradespeople. We need people who are not necessarily bachelor's degree holders, but they do that work. So we have a little bit of a pivot now. Sarah Sanders yesterday was taking questions in the briefing room, and people are just so obsessed with this comment by President Trump. So they had this sanctuary city roundtable at the White House. And while they were having a discussion, one of the law enforcement officials, he's ICE and law enforcement, he was talking about how if he knows someone is a part of MS-13, the treacherous and deadly gang that comes to us from south of the border, and they set up drug dealing operations and slavery and rape operations here in this country. And he was talking about how he can know someone is MS-13, like have quantifiable proof that person is MS-13, but they have to commit crimes that reach a certain threshold before he can nab them and flag them for deportation. So when he said that to President Trump during the roundtable, President Trump said, these are animals and we got to get them out of here. So the news media immediately took that clip, didn't play the corresponding lead up to it that gives it context, and started trumpeting it out. President Trump thinks immigrants are animals. It just dovetails into all the other things he said about blah, 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 blah. Okay, hysterical individuals. Okay, So some people bought into that. But as soon as I heard it, because I didn't have the context either, I just heard that he'd said immigrants are animals. And I thought, I know he didn't say that. So I looked, and contextually speaking, it makes sense that he would call people who beat other people to death with sledgehammers while they're still alive. In other words, it's torture. It's easier to execute someone for the person who's being executed than to beat them to death, breaking all of the bones in their body and making them bleed to death and die of internal injuries. That's painful. That's torture. It is also abominable that you would gather together in groups and choose people to kidnap and repeatedly rape and then kill. So when he said they're animals, he's talking about this barbaric behavior that they're bringing into the United States. We have enough of our own homegrown idiocy and evil without having people come over the border and bring in huge gangs of people who want to do this kind of stuff. So it's a natural reaction for someone who is blunt and, as Kanye West says, has dragon energy, whatever that means, to speak about this in the gut, visceral reaction that he did. But as usual, when they tried to bring this garbage up to Sarah Huckabee Sanders in the briefing room, she let them know that she wasn't having any of it. It's number 7.
Steve, I just want to ask you, because so many people in the country have been talking about it in the last 24 hours. What did the president mean when he said that some immigrants are not people, they're animals?
The president was very clearly referring to MS-13 gang members who enter the country illegally and whose deportations are hamstrung by our laws. This is one of the most vicious and deadly gangs that operates by the motto of rape, control, and kill. If the media and liberals want to defend MS-13, they're more than welcome to. Frankly, I don't think the term that the president used was strong enough. MS-13 has done heinous acts. It took an animal to stab a man 100 times and decapitate him and rip his heart out. It took an animal to beat a woman they were sex trafficking with a bat 28 times, indenting part of her body. And it took an animal to kidnap, drug, and rape a 14-year-old Houston girl. Frankly, I think that the term animal doesn't go far enough, and I think that the president should continue to use his platform and everything he can do under the law to stop these types of horrible, horrible, disgusting people.
Do you see what's happening here? So basically, if you can't report the news and outrage people, then you're going to make it up. And they wonder why President Trump calls them fake news. And as someone, so y'all know, I write for different publications, guest columns, etc. I used to have a column at the Post-Dispatch. And some people have told me, well, you are a member of the media and you are a journalist, whether you like it or not. I'm like, well, I mean, I guess if you count what I'm doing in the realm of journalism, sure, I guess I'm a part of that group. And so it's, to me, it is utterly despicable that so many operate in this way. It impugns an entire profession of people who actually went to college to do this, who aren't autodidacts like myself, who come into this from somewhere else and are taking it on as a job that I'm doing. I want to do it, but it's not my original training. But it still means that there's a lack of respect for people who do the work because of these horrible, injurious types of activities undertaken by individuals who have an agenda. Their agenda has literally crippled their sense of right and wrong. President Trump has said enough things that people can legitimately be offended by without making stuff up. And I know we're getting to a place where maybe we've already passed it, where liberals are literally willing to defend MS-13 if they can use it to jab the president. Just think about it for a second. The things she described just there are the tip of the iceberg with what MS-13 has been able to accomplish. MS-13 is directly linked to the top 5 murder capitals in the United States, to the number of deaths in each of those murder capitals, of which St. Louis is number 1 per capita and Chicago is number 1 total for per actual number. You can link that directly back to MS-13 operating within these cities. And you're going to sit up and say that if someone who has seen the death toll and spoken to the parents of people who've lost their kids to these horrible actions by MS-13, and his reaction is that these gang members are animals, and you're going to defend them? You're going to defend the murderers and the rapists just because that gives you an opportunity to hit Donald Trump? You have plenty of opportunities. You don't need this one. So, you know, I'm not a part of the group of journalists who engages in this type of behavior, so I don't feel any culpability for myself. But I am surprised because the same people who say you can't call these individuals sentient beings, animals, are the same ones who say we are nothing but animals ourselves. We should give in to our sexual urges. We should never teach abstinence in schools. We are animals. We have sex. We don't need to be monogamous. The same people who say we can't call MS-13 members animals also say that we have to be nice when we're talking about this group or that group, namely illegal immigrants or, you know, criminals, et cetera, et cetera. But they also say that Donald Trump is a liar, that his daughter is a ghoul, that his wife is, she's an unintelligent, that lots of terms I'm not going to use here. So apparently it's just okay if they say the evil things and they're about people who are actually innocent. Ivanka Trump is innocent. She has never been accused of a crime and she's not a ghoul. But it's okay to say that about her. It's okay to say those kinds of things about Condoleezza Rice, who honorably served this country under multiple presidential administrations, plays concert piano, and is also, she's like gifted in every area you could think of. And they've called her everything but a child of God. And I could just go down the list. I can think of so many people who are in the public sphere who've never raped or hammered anybody to death, who have been called every name in the book. But if you call someone, a group of people who are murdering and raping children in this country, if you call them animals, well, now you've just gone too far. And I got to know, like, how are you sleeping at night? Or is it that you're able to sleep because your head, if you knock on it, it's like the sound of knocking on an empty box? Like, what is going on with you that this is okay? So we have a few other subjects that we're going to get into, and we'll never figure out exactly why it is these people are doing these things. We're going to have our guest, and then later in the program, we're going to talk about the United States settling more refugees than the population of Philadelphia. And Philadelphia is one of our top 20 cities in population here in this country. We have FEC records indicating that Hillary campaign illegally laundered $84 million, but we're still worried about Trump paying Stormy $130,000. And next segment, we have our guest, Larry Pfeiffer, director of the Hayden Center. He's going to be with us to talk about Gina Haspel being the new director of the Central Intelligence Agency, another woman in power under Donald Trump. Stay right there.
Hi, this is Kirk Cameron, and I am honored to be partnering with the Ministry of Preborn and American Family Radio to help moms choose life.
Actor Kirk Cameron supports Preborn.
My 4 oldest children were adopted. That is because of caring and compassionate people who help those young mothers choose life. My wife is an adopted child, and her birth mother chose life for her. If it weren't for those caring individuals that help those young moms value the sacredness of life, I wouldn't have my wife, I wouldn't have my 4 adopted children, and the 2 natural-born children that we have wouldn't exist either. My whole family is here because of people that are involved with ministries like Preborn.
Underwrite a free ultrasound and help save a baby's life. Go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com. Or dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. All gifts are tax deductible. Your love can save a life.
Up next, Carol Swain with 2 minutes to think about it. From poverty to professor, from GED to PhD, a bold Christian speaking truth to power. Here's Carol with today's 2 minutes.
Hello, folks. There was a time when pretty much all diplomacy was seen as something best left to a small clique of lifetime professionals. No average Joe needed to apply. We sent Henry Kissinger, they sent Andrei Gromyko, and the long and involved talks would ensue. Treaties with fancy names would eventually be signed, yet not much looked all that different. That, they would tell you, was the art of diplomacy, and that seemed to work okay when dealing with nations who had a genuine stake in the diplomatic game. Others, like North Korea, see our old-time diplomacy as a means of picking the pockets of our good intentions. Along comes President Donald Trump and the new diplomacy of finding out what someone really wants. Kim Jong-un is the third of the Kim family who have been running an impoverished North Korea since just after World War II. The Kims don't seem to want better conditions for their starving population, the U.S. alone having donated about 2.3 million metric tons of food since 1995. President Trump's straightforward message of the consequences of Kim Jong-un not giving up his nuclear weapons program let us find out what Kim really wants. His power more than his nukes. Nukes or no nukes, Kim likes being a dictator. Kim also sees that doing a deal with the president is safer than calling his bluff because bluffs just aren't part of the new diplomacy.
To learn more about Carol and the Carol Swain Foundation, visit carolmswain.net and make sure you follow her on Facebook at Professor Carol M. Swain and on Twitter at Carol M. Swain.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right.
Welcome back to the show, and I want to give you a preview for next week. So we're going to have an in-depth discussion on Monday about the Church of Bay. It's back in the news again because certain individuals in the Catholic Church in California are using what they called Bay Mass, Beyonce Mass, to get people back into the pews. And so they're playing secular music in Catholic churches, and they're taking Wednesday night service, which used to have about 50 people in it, and packing it out with 700 people at a really beautiful cathedral, Grace Cathedral in California. And I want to talk to you about what this portends for, for the Catholic Church. I'm not Catholic, but for church in general, for us to see church leadership rely on secular musical people like Beyonce, who has her own church in Atlanta, by the way, to pack out their pews. So right now, it's my pleasure to welcome Larry Pfeiffer, director of the Hayden Center, former chief of staff to the CIA, and director of the White House Situation Room. Larry, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Stacy. Thank you very much for having me on.
I can't wait to talk to you because Gina Haspel, come on.
Yeah.
Yes.
I must admit, when they asked me to come talk on your show, I figured I'd be spending most of my time talking about how desperately we needed to get her voted in and how we had certain senators out there sitting on the fence. But lo and behold, they were able to get it through, and she was confirmed yesterday. And I ultimately think that's good news for CIA and good news for the country.
Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. You have the insider scoop. You were someone who not just worked at the CIA, but you were a former chief of staff to the CIA. So you know the inner workings there. You understand the dynamics. What does this actually mean? And I'm coming from the perspective of someone who I respect her work, her previous career, 30 years serving in leadership and heading up some very difficult operations, things that I don't think a lot of Americans who are criticizing her actually have the stomach to put up with. She not only did those jobs, but she did them well. She withstood the scrutiny of them afterwards. And now She's been basically number 2 at the CIA for quite a while, and now she's number 1. What does all of this mean?
Well, number one, she is a dedicated public servant. As I said on another show the other day, her loyalties to the Constitution and to the preservation of the security and ultimately freedom of the American people. So that's all very, very positive. Number 2, she is a 33-year professional. It's a good thing for the people of CIA. It's a good thing for the people of the intel community to have somebody who is so well versed in the intricacies of the tradecraft that has taken place there. She understands it. She can represent it very well. I think that's critical to this administration as well, where we have a president who, and this isn't a criticism, this is just a fact. This is a president who comes from outside of this world. He did not come from government. He did not know the intel community, and so she's somebody who is an expert in that community and can represent it to the president and can give him deep, insightful analysis about what's going on in the world and help him make then better, more informed decisions. She's also, having been from the operational side at CIA, she is incredibly knowledgeable about the tools and capabilities that CIA brings in terms of human intelligence collection, but also the covert action tools that the president has at his disposal. Those are often controversial, they're often criticized, but they, for the long history of our republic, going all the way back to George Washington, we have had instances where the best way to affect policymaking is through the use of tools where the American hand is hidden, and that is okay. That is a good thing. We sometimes don't want our hand to be seen in certain activities, and an organization like CIA knows how to do that.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, and so you mentioned just now, you mentioned the term tradecraft. And so for the listeners who might be tuning in, we're speaking with Larry Pfeiffer. He's the director of the Hayden Center, also former chief of staff to the CIA and director of the White House Situation Room. So someone with an expert level of knowledge about the subject matter that we're discussing, which is our new head of the Central Intelligence Agency, Gina Haspel. So when you say tradecraft, can you tell the listeners and myself what you mean specifically by that?
Sure. Tradecraft, I guess it is a kind of an internal term of art there, but what it implies is that when somebody comes to work at the Central Intelligence Agency or similarly at the National Security Agency or the Defense Intelligence Agency, these are people that bring knowledge, skill, and talents to the table, but there are also like tactic, techniques, procedures that they need to learn and master in order to do their job both well and within the law and appropriate. So tradecraft are just those various skills they need to learn to do the job. So if you're a human intelligence collection officer, you're going to learn how you can best work with an individual to manipulate them, to get them to give you information that is otherwise secret or that they might otherwise not have been inclined to give you. So you learn different tools and trades. If you're on the analysis side of the house, you learn all the different ways in which information can be analyzed and presented. You learn about how to test hypotheses. You learn how to do alternative analysis. There's almost a science to these different skills. And so the individuals go through quite rigorous training, and then they have and they're graded on it, and they're assessed on it, and they're promoted on it or not promoted, or heck, if they can't do it, they're thanked for their service and sent on their merry way. So that's what I mean by tradecraft.
Perfect. So for someone like me who I've served on boards, one thing I learned over the years doing that is that there are ways that you can use the procedure to bring about results that you want that are within all of the different laws that govern public boards. And so tradecraft, so that you're referring to, you show up, you have a bachelor's degree, and you might have experience 10 years or so from some other agency, and you are an intelligence person, but you're speaking of staying within the bounds of the laws that govern you at the CIA and operating within the structure of the CIA so that you're working with your cohorts and accomplishing your goals, but you're maximizing the tools at your disposal, which I think is something that recently I've become aware the media actually doesn't want the CIA or the NSA or Homeland Security or Immigration and Customs Enforcement to be able to use all of the tools that are available to them, because those tools would make them successful at their jobs and Americans would be safer. And for some reason, many in the media don't want that, which is why they opposed Gina's nomination and confirmation. So that brings us over to North Korea. And I've been so pleased with the developments, because I felt last fall, and I believe I said so publicly here on the air, that the amount of back and forth between President Trump and Kim Jong-un was a resetting of the table, because we had been so weak and limp-wristed under President Obama towards Kim Jong-un that President Trump had to come out on Twitter and in his public face and present a much different American head. You know, he had to, or it would have been business as usual under President Obama. So I didn't see the tweets as being something embarrassing or something that would lead to war. I saw them as, you know, now we're shaking hands really hard and we're maybe arm wrestling, and you're learning that I am not President Obama. Now here we are. There's a meeting that's imminent. There's a possibility of denuclearization, which is our end goal. How do you see the president approaching this going forward? Because he's basically gotten himself where he wants to go, but now you have the final hurdle to get over.
Well, I guess what I would say, and you know, I will offer first that I'm a guy that spent 32 years in the intel community, and we pride ourselves on being apolitical in the work we do. We serve any president, and presidents have agendas, and our job is to inform those agendas, and so they make the best decisions possible. You know, that being said, absolutely agree that the path we were on with Korea was headed in a direction that was going to, you know, end in a place that no American would want it to be, you know, with a nuclear-armed North Korea with missiles that could hit our homeland. Nobody wants that. So this president, but it could have been any president. I think that the way things were evolving, whoever was going to be president, whether it was Trump or anybody else, they were going to have to deal with this problem in this term. I think I'll give the president credit. His tough stance has yielded some results. It's gotten us to the point where we are going to sit down and have a meeting. But I think your listeners, I think most Americans are going to need to be patient. This is going to go probably in fits and starts. I think we saw a little bit of that last week, where suddenly out of the blue, after this wonderful, lovey-dovey peace initiative that Kim was on, suddenly he was back to his kind of bellicose language. I think we're gonna see a lot of that back and forth. I just would caution the American public to be as patient as possible. You know, at the end of the day, a North Korea that's talking to us and not testing nuclear bombs and not launching missiles, that's a good thing. So, if we can keep them in that place and hopefully advance the ball down the field and get them to actually abandon some of these capabilities, I think that would be great. Patience is the real word of the day.
I think that's good advice, especially for our listeners, because one of the things that we really want is we just want to see like normal people. If you and I were having a difficulty, we could meet. We could actually set the date for the meeting. We could meet. We could like hash things out, come to an agreement. Even if we didn't really love it totally, we could compromise and come to agreement, and we could end it all in the one meeting. But that's you, one person, me, one person, hashing out something that, you know, between the two of us is like a personal matter, or maybe even a business matter, but we could probably get to a place where we could agree. We're talking about the president of, he's a dictator. He's not really a president. He's the dictator of North Korea. And they have a lot of really, really tough problems that we don't think about when we think of North Korea, namely their food shortages and the fact that their currency isn't accepted around the world. They're not well respected. They don't have proper trade, and they're really beholden to China. And then you have the United States, and we have our own interests that we want to satisfy. And so I think that's fantastic advice. Okay, so I want to circle back around. So back to CIA Director Haspel. What is she going to do first? What action do you see her taking first, as now she's the head of the agency, and she's going to be working with President Trump on a number of issues? What does she do now?
Well, I think she will she was within CIA. There are a lot of challenges that CIA faces in the future. Many of them are technological in nature. So I think she's going to work very hard to ensure that the agency is addressing these technological challenges or taking advantage of technologies to ultimately make for better tradecraft, as we were talking about earlier. And some of the challenges they face, in the human intelligence world, we have individuals who need to operate undercover. Well, it is becoming harder and harder and harder for someone to operate undercover, given the digital trails we all leave behind us as we, go through our lives. So, if you have an individual who suddenly pretends to be somebody else and he doesn't have a digital trail behind him, that's a tell. The guy's probably an agent, so you wouldn't want to deal with them. So they're going to have to grapple with issues like that. At the same time, though, there's a lot of great benefits that can be obtained from technology. The use of machine learning and artificial intelligence to perhaps do some of the more pedantic analytic tasks that need to be done, to then free up the analysts to have the sort of bigger thoughts, more complex analysis that we'd really like them to be doing. So I think that is going to be a lot of her focus. It's a lot of the focus in the intel community today. Stepping outside of the intel community in terms of supporting the president and the agenda of the president, clearly their plates are going to be very full with the North Korea issue, supporting those negotiations. I think they're going to be very busy supporting any kind of a reset with the Iranian agreement, and of course dealing with just Iran's malign influence in that region and around the world. And then of course, thirdly, there is the issue of Russia and China in terms of them being great powers and wanting to perhaps challenge us in different parts of the world. So she's going to want to make sure that CIA is maximizing its resources to support those policy deliberations.
That's a pretty big, I wouldn't call it a plate. I'd say that's like a platter that's attached to a huge table, and it's all one big thing. It's a lot. That's a lot.
But at the end of the day, there's way too much to do and never enough people and money to do it. So as much support and help we can get from Congress and from the president and from the American people, and if we can get people off of the constant hand-wringing about things that happened 15 years ago, and then focus on the future, I think we'd be all in a better place.
Well, the first step to that is getting a new head in place over at the CIA, which thankfully the Senate was able to do, to give the president someone he can trust to work over there. And I love the point that you made about career employees at the CIA serving any administration and trying to do the best that they can to provide their work for that administration. And I'm hoping that we can see that with President Trump now. And this is just one more checkbox that we needed to get out of the way for him to be able to move forward on some of these things. I want to give everybody a place where they can find out more about you. Do you have a website or Twitter or anything like that they can find out more?
Sure. So I'm at the Hayden Center. It's where I work closely with Michael Hayden, former CIA director. It's at George Mason University, and they can find us at haydencenter.gmu.edu. We're located in Arlington, Virginia, and they can go to the website, find out more information. We've got a YouTube channel where we've got some great videos of some presentations we've done in the last several months. The most fun one we did was just earlier this month. We did a big event with the cast and crew of the television show Homeland, which was a lot of fun. So those things are available there. And we've got a Twitter feed as well. So MV Hayden Center is the Twitter handle. So, yeah, please encourage your listeners to take a look at us, and we'd love to hear from them.
Perfect. Thank you so much, sir. Larry Pfeiffer, director of the Hayden Center, former chief of staff to the CIA, thank you for joining us today. Have a great weekend.
All right. You too, Stacey.
All right. So we will be back with the last segment of Stacey on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. You want to be here for this. Stay where you are.
This week during our family worship time together, when we turned to the scripture, I was sharing with my family, and we were discussing the scripture that says, do not be conformed to this world, but be ye transformed. And I was explaining the whole caterpillar to cocoon to butterfly process. My son said, he's 6 years old, Daddy, Daddy, I get it. We're like the caterpillars. God provides the cocoon, and God's desire all along is, even though we're in caterpillar form, is for us to become butterflies. And then look what he said. But you know when we get into trouble, Daddy? When we try to move from caterpillar to butterfly, and we skip over God. And when you try to skip over God, you think you have your wings, but you fall flat.
Tune in to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk.
And I have to tell you, I had to fight back tears in the moment because I'm saying, oh, Lord, he's getting this.
Coming next week on The Dwelling Place, Pastor Al Pittman continues to walk us through the Bible, line by line and verse by verse, to let God show us just how timeless His truth is. That's next week on The Dwelling Place.
Pastor Joseph Parker.
You know, obviously when things are going well, it's much easier to have an attitude of thanksgiving and praise to the Lord. But even when things are going difficult, it's important to know too, there's never a time it's inappropriate for us to thank and praise God. Now some may ask, well, what about when you're going through difficult times, when you're walking through the valley of the shadow of death? We can have two different responses. We can worship or we can whine.
Tune in to the Hour of Intercession, weekday afternoons at 1 Central on Urban Family Talk.
Yo, what up, Sid?
Yo, what's up, Mike? How you doing?
Man, I'm good, bro. Just left the club, you know, the usual.
The club? Man, them clubs don't love back, man. You ain't learned yet. You better slow down, dude.
Ah, come on, Sid. You remember those days? We used to turn up together, man.
Used to, brother. I'm on something much different.
Like what, though? I mean, that Jesus music you be rapping about, or beatboxing, or whatever you be doing.
I'm saying, though, that's how I worship. God gave me rap, so I give it back.
Why, though? Gospel rap is boring, man.
Boring? There's nothing boring about the ransom that ransomed me with himself. Took me off the shelf to transform me into my best. Surrounding me with those of like minds. He drops bombs, some of which is found on UrbanFamilyTalk.com.
This is Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
But what happened economically for Americans in their day-to-day lives in the past year? It's more than just Russia and collusion. We've got to live our lives. So let's take a look. Americans have made gains with this president. Nearly 3 million jobs have been created since Trump took office. And there are a record 6.3 million job openings that employers are ready to fill now. The unemployment rate has fallen almost a full percentage point from 4.8% in January 2017 to 3.9% in April. That is the lowest in 18 years. Good news. Wages are starting to tick up slowly, rising 2.6% in April from the previous year. So we still need to play some real catch up there. But meanwhile, the stock market continues on its 9-year bull run. The Dow has gained 20% in the past year alone, fueled by strong corporate earnings. Only half of Americans are actually invested in stocks, and mostly through 401ks and other retirement accounts. But President Trump says his tax cuts, his deregulation, and killing the agenda of regulating and holding businesses back are going to boost our economy, which he says will benefit all Americans in the form of higher wages.
Okay, so that's great news. And I know you're thinking to yourself, that voice sounds familiar. That's Stephanie Ruhle of MSNBC breaking down the accomplishments of President Donald J. Trump. I know. You're probably just glanced over at your window because you're expecting a little juicy cartoon pig to slam into it full speed. I'm looking. I don't see anything. Yeah, she was actually covering this on her show, on the air. Like, this isn't a clip of her on a hot mic. She's actually talking about what the president has been able to accomplish in the economy. It's good news. So Good News Friday. Welcome to the show. I'm Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right here on Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio. And it's good to be with you. Happy Friday. So let's get back to the show sheet. There were 2 things I wanted to make sure and get out of the way before the end of this week. And these are informational bits that you can put back into your toolkit for information, obviously, but also so that when you're speaking to people and they're like, well, we're not doing our fair share to take in enough refugees. America should be taking in more. Actually, we're doing more than our fair share, which is kind of an American thing. In fact, the next T-shirts that people should put out is Americans doing more than our fair share, because that's what we do. So this story, this is fresh, red hot off the presses from, like less than 24 hours. Fresh new report from fiscal year 2008 to fiscal year 2017. The United States gave lawful permanent resident status to 1,761,927 individuals from outside this country on humanitarian grounds. That number is larger than the population of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This is according to a press release from the White House. Just in case anybody's wondering, they hate refugees, do they? Seems like they would have been able to put a dent in that number, at least over the past, 14, 15 months the president's been in office. So individuals admitted under these humanitarian immigration programs include refugees admitted through the Refugee Resettlement Program, which we hate. Parolees, cancellation of removals, special immigrant interpreters, beneficiaries of the Nicaraguan Adjustment and Central American Relief Act, beneficiaries of the Haitian Refugee Immigration Fairness Act, special immigrant juveniles, victims of human trafficking and other crimes, that's a T visa, victims of criminal activity, a U visa, battered spouses or children and parents battered or abused of U.S. citizens, Cuban, Haitian entrants, and parolees adjusting under the Help Haiti Act of 2010. Additionally, during the last 20 years, 442,000 individuals were granted either temporary protected status or deferred enforced departure. So, our expansive, humanitarian-based, lottery-based immigration system fails to consider the needs of American workers and taxpayers who have been burdened by decades of low-skilled immigration that has suppressed wages, fueled unemployment, strained federal resources, and overall aggravated the pants off most of us. Census data shows that current U.S. immigration policy admits large numbers of individuals who struggle to become financially independent and instead rely on a vast array of government benefits paid for by U.S. taxpayers. Roughly half of all immigrant-headed households use one or more welfare program. Under our current refugee and asylum programs, federal government brings in hundreds of thousands of mostly lesser-skilled migrants into the United States on top of other legal immigration flows, which can quickly become eligible for cash and non-cash federal welfare, federal entitlement, and free medical care, education, and a host of state and local benefits. So what's the point? Stop talking about the American people not doing enough, that we're that we're immigrant phobic or that we're xenophobic or that we don't want people to come here. It isn't even about what we want anymore. It's about what's actually happened. And the numbers show we are overly generous with entrance into this country. And so if you're sitting there, I get this every time we talk about this subject, somebody will comment on YouTube and they'll be calling me everything but a child of God. You're black. You should be siding with the immigrants. You should be siding with the people of color against the white oppressors. I don't have any white people oppressing me. If there is anything that I am supposed to have that I do not have yet, it is not because white people are keeping it from me. It is because I have either not earned it or because my Father in heaven has not yet ordained for me to have that thing. That's it. So there is no white oppressor. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. People annoy me. I can think of an instance yesterday where we were out somewhere and somebody annoyed me, but I wasn't oppressed. Now, if you want to know what oppression is, first you need to look up the dictionary for what oppression is and then adjust your outlook. White people are not oppressing black people. Now, there are plenty of people who feel like, I've been there, something that you thought you earned, you didn't get. But if you are a Christian and you believe God ordains your steps and that he works all things out for your good, we're living in equality right now. We're living in it right now. Not equality of outcomes, but equality of persons and equality of opportunity. And so if you feel like you're not getting the opportunity that you deserve, then you need to go after it even harder, or you need to adjust your circumstances, adjust your surroundings. But please stop talking about white people oppressing you. Just stop. It's time to let that go. People are going to people, and evil people still exist among us, but it's not white oppression. We had the first black president. Oprah's still swanning around in amongst us. You are not oppressed unless you're oppressed by the travesty of your own personal decisions. You might want to go check the mirror and find out who's oppressing you. It might be you. You might have made decisions that have severely limited your opportunities, and you need to make some corresponding decisions in the opposite direction to open those opportunities back up for yourself. Go to the mirror and check yourself. Then decide what you're going to do, and stop being a scapegoater of white people, white men, white women, Asians, you name it. Every time you turn around, they're doing that. No, they're not. So me wanting us to follow the law here as a nation, I have every right to want that. I'm a taxpayer, and you should want it too. So the last thing. Okay, so we've got this. I'm not shocked a lot. I say it often on the show. I'm hard to shock, but I actually had to stop for a second and double check the source, because I wanted to make sure I wasn't reading, fake news. So it turns out not only is this not fake news, this is like the stuff that every single news and media operation should be talking about. I know there's breaking news with the story down in Florida, or not Florida, Texas, Houston. There's been a shooting down there. Obviously praying for those people, the families, the victims, everybody. There's breaking news, obviously, but this is the story. This is it. FEC records indicating that Hillary Clinton's campaign illegally laundered $84 million. Now, I'm going to give you the highlights because we have just a few minutes left in the show, but I want to get this to you, and I'll put the link inside the stream so you can find it. I think I already posted on the Facebook page, but I'll make sure it's there. So you've got a lawsuit filed last week in D.C. District Court summarizing the DNC Clinton conspiracy and providing detailed evidence from Federal Election Commission filings confirming the complaint's allegations that Democrats undertook an extensive scheme to violate federal campaign limits. Do you hear me talking to you? While they're up here talking about Stormy Daniels and 130,000 and who funneled money to pay for that, this is legitimately American people donating money to the DNC to go to their state party apparatus, and the funds were transferred without the state party apparatuses actually having control over the funds. So under FEC law, when donations come in and they're going to go to the DNC, even if they're going to end up in a presidential campaign, the person or entity doing the transferring, they have to first have control of the money. But the Clinton run DNC didn't want to trust these local state and apparatuses with passing the money on. So they did it themselves to make sure it went to Hillary, who then funneled some of it backwards. But in other words, it was always under her control. So you got Dan Backer, a campaign finance lawyer and attorney of record in the lawsuit. He explained the underlying law in an article for Investors Business Daily. So under federal law, an individual donor can contribute $2,700 to any one candidate, $10,000 to any state party committee, and during the 2016 cycle, the numbers were $33,400 to a national party's main account. Now, the groups can all get together and take a single check from a donor for the sum of all of those contribution limits, and that's legal because the donor cannot exceed the base limit for any one recipient. So one person can say, I'm going to do all of the maximums and write one check, and that's what some people call bundling. You have people who are, they're fundraisers and they're the large bundled donations. That's what this is about. So this legal loophole allows bundlers to raise large sums of money from wealthy donors, more than $400,000 at a time, filtering the funds to the national committees. Democrats and Republicans alike exploit this tactic, but once the money reaches national committees, other limits then apply. Now, a client of Backer's, Dan Backer, the campaign finance lawyer, suspected that the DNC had exceeded these limits and began reviewing the FEC filings. What he discovered, as he explained in the interview, was much worse. There was extensive evidence in the Democrats' own FEC reports when coupled with their own public statements that demonstrated massive straw man contributions that were basically papered through the state parties to the DNC and then directly to Clinton's campaign in a clear violation of federal campaign finance law. This is amazing. So it's like a shell game with millions of dollars. During the 2016 presidential election, Hillary Clinton, the DNC, and participating state committees established the Hillary Victory Fund as a joint fundraising committee to accept contributions from large donors, some exceeding $400,000, still legal. But then to comply with campaign finance law, HVF needed to transfer the donations to the specific recipients, whether the Clinton campaign, down-ticket Democrats, DNC, or state committees. The FEC records show, however, several large contributions reported as received by HVF and the same amount on the same day, occasionally the following day, recorded as received by the DNC from a state Democratic committee, but without the state Democratic committee ever reporting the contribution. So in other words, they were saying we're going to give to the campaign maximum so much to the DNC, so much to the Clinton campaign, so much to the individual candidate, so much to the state party, totaling the maximum. But the money that was supposed to go to the state party never got there. So then they list a bunch of individual donations, which I'm not going to read those to you. We're short on time anyway. They used the party as a fundraising clearinghouse. The Clinton campaign's control of the contributions did not end once the funds reached the DNC, as the complaint filed with the FEC detailed. Rather, public statements by former DNC chairwoman Donna Brazile acknowledged that as Hillary's campaign gained momentum, she resolved the party's death and put it on a starvation diet. The party had become dependent on her campaign for survival, which she expected to wield control of its operations, and she did. So Gary Gensler, chief financial officer for the Clinton campaign, which operated as Hillary for America, or HFA, out of Brooklyn, likewise stated that the Democratic Party was fully under control of the Clinton campaign. The campaign had the DNC on life support, giving it money every month to meet the basic expenses, while the campaign was using the party as a fundraising clearing house. The Supreme Court made it clear that this activity is illegal. This is not a matter of debate. This is 2014's ruling on McCutcheon v. FEC, that this exact scenario violates the law. The question is, she's broken the law yet again. Who's going to answer for it? Happy Friday to you. God bless you. See you next week.